Hello everyone, how you all doing? Hope you're having a great day so far. Today we have a special video. July 14th will be the Netlabel Day, a day specially dedicated to Netlabels throughout the world, and there are quite a few still active. I have a Netlabel. It's called Enough Records. It's one of its founders from back in 2001. The reason why I have doubt on the year is because we had a radio station, pirate radio station, operating a year and a half before, and then we relaunched our catalog. So the official relaunch was on December 2001, but we've been operating since 2000. So that's why I don't know the precise date exactly. Anyways, I have a Netlabel. I followed Netlabel scene for quite a long time. This is before I had internet, and I would like to go on a bit of a history throughout the demo scene ages and tell a bit of the history behind what is net audio, exactly how it came about. So first let's get some music playing, and then we can talk a little bit more after some music. So one of the first tracks that I heard from the tracking scene, before it was called the Netlabel, they were called music groups. And this was back in around 99, 2000 that the term Netlabel was coined. And it was around this time that MP3s also started being common. And people started having computing power to play MP3s and disk space and bandwidth on the internet to share MP3s. Before then, there were what we call music groups, which shared files made with what we call trackers. I'm going to show you what a tracker is. I'm going to play you one of my favorite tracker musics from back then. This is a modern tracker, but it's based on an old tracker. It's called Schism tracker, but it's based around Impulse tracker, which in its turn was based around Scream tracker. So there's a very long legacy on the tracker scene, and it's a whole world. I can spend a whole video, a whole hour talking about different trackers that exist and where they came from. I'm gonna play you a track, which was one of the tracks that got me very interested in trackers, called Chiba City Lights 96. And the original track was made by Basehead, and this is the Chuck Biscuits remix of Chiba City Lights, remixed in 1996. It's part of a catalog from this Netlabel called the Cosmic Free Music Foundation. Previously was called KLF, not related to the English group KLF. And they've been around releasing tracked music for a very long time. Chuck Biscuits or Chuck B was a regular on the label. And where the hell is Chiba? It's in here somewhere. There it is, Chiba City Lights 96. This is what the website used to look like. And I highly doubt that the MP3 was released in 96. It was probably added years later when they were revising their catalog. Anyways, let's take a listen to the track. So yeah, very lengthy track, over 8 minutes overall, I think. Tech house, a little bit acid there. This was like very common on the early tracker scene. And all these tracker programs, you could see the entire thing, the entire pattern that they were playing. You could check all the samples that they were using. There was a lot of remixing going on. And it was very hard for people to control what other people could do with your samples and your track. So it was a bit of Creative Commons didn't exist back then. And a lot of people didn't like that other people used each other's samples. Some were totally fine with it, so it was a bit of a free-for-all. But a lot of groups were very active trading music back and forth using these formats. This is the best part. Love that section. Loved it so much when I heard it for the first times. Played this track so many times when I was young, or when I had an MS-DOS box. We used to trade files, and these files were traded through BBSs back then. You had to dial in to someone else's system and you would upload something and you would get something in return. So this is why these files had to be so small, and they were optimized for being small, fitting into disks, being easy to swap around with your friends. There was a whole scene that existed around the whole BBSing and swapping. Then when the internet came up, we still had to keep things small, but we started using what's called FTPs, and there were also quotas, upload and download quota. And if you were a creative person, like a musician, you would want to create music to have something to upload, so you would have enough quota to download other stuff like the wares that you wanted or the games that you wanted. So yeah, this is one of the first tracker musics that I really love. It wasn't the first that I heard, but it was one that I really, stayed passionate about throughout the many years, and it's one that I really recommend. KFMF itself were a very prolific label back in the day. I think they ended around 2000 or something like that. I could be wrong, don't know the exact date. But they were a very prolific label, doing as a music group. They released individual releases for a very long time, and a lot of the musicians that were active back then were releasing as part of KFMF. Moving on the years, this was 96. Then we go to Five Musicians, and Five Musicians is also a very important label. They are archived at netlabelarchive.org, which is a nice new project by Zach, who's been trying to make sure that the old releases of the old Netlabels are still archived in one single place, and you can download the stuff and you can access also the PDF and stuff like that. Anyways, this track in particular, Volume, was one of the tracks that I really loved from Five Musicians. Made me fall in love with Hunz, which is a brilliant musician, still nowadays a very favorite musician of mine. It was extremely experimental. It was tracker music, but it had vocals and very weird stuff. Anyways, let's take a listen, and then I'll tell you a bit more about Five Musicians as a whole, if the Internet Archive allows for us to peruse this item. Otherwise, I would talk. Okay, here we go.
ya, now I'm gonna catch ya. Shove your motive in your brain. I've got something to explore. Rap ya, slap ya, now I'm gonna catch ya. Shove your motive in your brain. I've got something to explore. Go anticipation. Take away all my volume. Take me. Rap ya, slap ya, now I'm gonna catch ya. Shove your motive in your brain. I've got something to explore. Rap ya, slap ya, now I'm gonna catch ya. Shove your motive in your brain. I've got you are. Go and take patience. Take away all my volume. Take me. Take away all my volume. Go and take patience. Take away all my volume. Take me. Go stop ya. Now I'm gonna catch ya. Take away all my volume. Shove your motive in your brain.
Not sure how well it aged. I mean, you can tell there's some flaws in production that definitely needed mastering for today's standards, but back then, this was 97. He sampled vocals, some weird effects, had this weird trip-hop vibe to it, which trip-hop wasn't really that famous back then. I think Purist has popularized it like in 98 or something like that. So yeah. Anyways, I wanted to talk about Netlabel archive. Netlabel archive. I wanted to talk about 5 musicians in particular. So there were a lot of music groups back then on this BBS / FTP days of the early internet, late 90s, as you can see, or mid 90s. And one of the labels, back to Netlabel. One of the labels or the music groups that became more prominent was 5 musicians. It was called 5 musicians because there were just 5 musicians, although the musician would rotate. So technically speaking, overall there are more than 5 musicians, but at a given time there were only 5 musicians, and it was known for having the best 5 musicians of the entire music tracking scene. So of course was debatable, but at the time, very strong names, and every release was awesome. Necros was a household name, and we'll hear something from him later on. Melody later became MD, also known as Ksht, also became extremely popular, popularized IDM in the demo scene through his experimental with trackers. And Melody was also instrumental in getting a physical location for the archives to be, for all the music archives. We wouldn't have FileScene.org music groups archiving all the different music groups and Netlabel stuff that happened throughout the years if it wasn't for Jaakko Manin and Melody. He was one of the founders of Scene.org itself. And having this music group, he also started having the music releases on Scene.org. Scene.org originally was just for demo scene stuff, not for music groups. but there was kind of like a symbiosis between music groups and demo scene back then. So back then it was just the scene. We just called it the scene. You made demos, you made music discs, and releases were releases. You know, it was a music release or it was a demo release. There were also art releases for Ashi and Ansi packs and stuff like that. But music was very intertwined with the demo scene, and musicians who did stuff for music groups were also often the same musicians that did stuff for demos. One of the later more known releases from Melody was Applesap. It was one of the first releases on MP3 that I remember. Where is it? Here it is, Applesap. And they were all originally tracked. XM is the format for Fast Tracker 2, which was a famous tracker from the DOS days. And we're going to play track 6. And a lot of the tracks from this Applesap CD, or a release, if you want to call it. I call it a CD because it had a sleeve cover and everything, and you could actually print it and stuff like that. But it was an album, pretty much. Let's listen to the track and then we'll talk more. I think this is the rendered version from the XM file format, but I recall there was a remastered version of Applesap at some point. It's probably at scene.org uploaded here. Let's search real quick. 5 musicians, probably FM, yeah. Name that they want under. I don't see any special Applesap version. Well, maybe it's not here. I remember it existed though, but I'll have to check if it is. Maybe at archive.org. Anyways, what was I saying? Without MD, there wouldn't have been scene.org, and it was very instrumental in getting that, which ended up being one of the main repositories for storing music group releases early on the internet, where hosting was still very cost prohibitive, especially if you wanted to have big files like MP3 files on. And scene.org tried to host as many groups as possible, giving priority to the mostly related groups. In around 2001, there was a big Netlabel boom, which made things harder. I was actually part of scene.org staff at the point, and I helped a lot select which groups would be approved to have their stuff on scene.org. And it was good to see the boom of the Netlabel scene, but at the same time, it felt like a bit of the death of the music groups scene and the tracker music scene. Suddenly, everyone went MP3, and when everyone went MP3 and had an easy way to host their files, there was just people called it that it was a democratization of the system, because we reached like zero cost on making music and distributing music online, and it became a revolution of some sort. Suddenly artists that couldn't get their sounds heard had a platform to make their sounds heard free of charge for everyone. There were no proper ways to monetize their work. There was like stuff like mp3.com, which was trying to address that, but overall piracy was still rampant, so people still preferred to have their releases free for download and free for listen, and hope that the fans would recognize the quality and eventually get in touch with the musician. And it was a way for them to not have to deal with major labels to get the music distributed, which was the choke point. Either you were famous or you were not. And it was impossible to break through because major labels only wanted people with name already on it, which makes sense because they're in there to make money. They're not there to fulfill your young musicians' dreams. So Netlabel filled that vacuum a lot. It provided platforms for people who did not have a way to expose their music, to bring it forth and show to the masses with some curational stamp on top of it. That's why Netlabels were so popular in the beginning of 2000s. Let's move on to other labels. There were many labels active at this point in time. I remember Milk was also a very good label. Let's go back to the original Netlabel. Had this logo, very IDM/ambient sort of releases, which were really my cup of tea at the time. I was really discovering this genre. Cohen 3 in particular is a very good track, very ambient, drone, chill out, and I think it was one of the first drone ambient tracks that I really listened to and enjoyed and went back to, and really opened my mind about the power of drone ambient and why I fell in love with it. So let's take a listen to that for a little while. This one was originally a tracked format as well, a .it impulse tracker format, and it was so low in volume we really had to crank it to maximum to hear all the details in the samples. This MP3 pre-amped stuff a bit, or post-amped the sounds a bit. Totally love that track. Very enveloping. Kind of lost a little bbit on the rendering here to MP3. Don't know if it's the MP3 encoding, but like having it a real full volume, the original IT playing. It was such an experience back then. It has so many little details. You hear a clock ticking there, or a metronome probably. You hear so many little things. It was really amazing. And yeah, and this was part of Milk, a net label called Milk, which also ended up closing down after a few years. I were active up until 2001, had a lot of very experimental electronics releases, which was really my cup of tea at the time. A lot of hidden gems, very good hidden gems around here. Recognize a lot of these releases from having played them a lot. Okay, so moving on with a list of things, I'm going to talk about another label which was very interesting as well for me, which was Noise New Origins in Space Sound New Objectives in Sound Exploration. It's a label that was only active for like 4 years, but I had this track in particular. Actually was an EP, and they were one of the first labels to put out MP3s, and people gave them a lot of shit for putting out MP3s because they were so big. You had to download like 5 whole megs. You would spend the whole night downloading it on your modem just to get a single file. People gave them a lot of shit, and but the music was high quality, and one of the more memorable releases for me is Lascalla Sessions by Stereoman. Stereoman was a regular at Noise, and this release in particular is like a mix. It says right here, a mixed set of 5 tracks moving from IDM through psytrance to clean cycle techno. I don't remember any psytrance in there, but I'm gonna take his word for it. And actually the file got lost for a while. These links here don't work, and the only version that I have of it is actually the version that I uploaded to Enough Records website itself, which is spooky to say the least. And now someone has started to upload it to archive.org, but they are uploading it by year, and they missed the year 99, so this track is still missing from the archives. This EP, 35 minutes long. Let's listen to a little bit so you can understand why I loved it so much, and then we'll move on with our mix. Spent a lot of coding session listening to this on loop. Excellent mix. More on the history of Netlabels while we're waiting for this session to play out. There were a few websites back then that tried to popularize or give notice to Netlabels and music group releases. There were Discmags back then that released reviews of the latest releases and stuff like that. There were what was called charts mags, where you had votings from different people. People would vote by sending in their votes. There was a sheet, a .txt file which you could fill out and send to the person who was creating the charts mag. They would get all of those votes together. They would count the votes and they would publish the results on the charts mag. And there were different categories for different demo scene things, and some of them were the best music releases that were happening. And then there were some websites as well to showcase the best of the demo scene and music scene releases. One of them was called No Errors, one of the last versions of No Error that existed. It's still online pretty much, released in 2010, but the first one was released in 2000, the original No Error. It looked different and it was curated manually. This version that lasted the last years of No Error, you could, if you were a Netlabel curator, you could add your own news, just pretty much post whatever new releases would come out, and they would just approve or not approve of that. It was a good place to find the latest releases of stuff back then. And if I go back a few ones, you can even see some releases from Enough Records listed there. Let's see if I can find one. There we go. Total Reboot and Zank was released in Enough Records. Split out the MEP soundtrack. Total Reboot and Zank. Zank was the owner of the Bypass label, which was a very famous label back then. Very good music as well from Bypass. It's more the techno side of the mix. I want to move on to the next track, but I also want to listen to this. Decisions. Probably have prepared a visualizer of some sort for people to see bars floating around. massive, massive, massive mix. Listen to this so many times, can't get enough of it. But we do have to move on because I can't play the whole 35 minutes on this video. So we're gonna move on to another very critical acclaimed label, which was Monotonik and Mono 211. I'm gonna show you the list here. So you actually have a few sub-labels and everything. They had Mono 211, they had Monotonik, Mono Ravik for more rave stuff. They also had some mixes of stuff that was not exactly mono. This release in particular that I wanted to play was actually a set of remixes from Toriyamas. Or actually different remixes from different famous tracks or pop tracks, one in particular by Toriyamas, but there were other remixes of Toriyamas on Monotonik under other labels as well. Not sure if it's Nomo or not, but the special label called Nomo was for releasing copyright sensitive material like this one that we're about to listen, because it samples Toriyamas very clearly. this was released in 2001, according to the information here. A remix made by Purist, which is an alias of Fun Tourist, who did some very nice IDM stuff, released here on Mono and also on Milk, I think. It had very good releases and very much fast pace, and this was like very slow tempo but very beautiful at the same time. Totally love this release, still listen to it today, and it shows the power of what random people on the internet can do with your track if you don't restrict them to with weird copyright stuff. Not that I think Toriyamas ever allowed for this in particular, but at the time Creative Commons were starting to pop out, and the reason why I was searching about Radiohead's in Rainbow's thing was I was looking for the year that it was brought out, because remember it was one of the first albums, and then later I think they also released it under Creative Commons or public domain, something like that, that allowed people to do whatever they want. And later on 9 Inch Nails did something similar, and that kind of popularized the sense of Creative Commons being used for allowing people to do whatever the hell they want within certain limits to your tracks, and it helped popularize Creative Commons. Back then in 2001, Creative Commons was still not popular. There were a lot of Netlabels putting out music under the we don't know what the hell this license is. We just want music to be free for download. It didn't matter if people could do something else with it. There was some concern that it could be commercialized, but they still retained, the artists still retained copyright, so they would still be able to battle that. And but there was no specific license around. They probably already existed as an organization, Creative Commons, but it wasn't popular on the Netlabel scene yet. It became on the following years. I think 2003 was the year it became more definitely popular on the net audio. I remember funding enough records, and for many years we were running without Creative Commons, and we were founded in 2001. Only later on we retro adapted all our releases to have Creative Commons licenses assigned to them. Anyways, moving on to other labels. One thing that I wanted to also mention about this was that the creator of Monotonik, after he was done with Monotonik and Mono 211, he ended up working for archive.org for reasons that doesn't really matter. And he was one of the first people who had the idea to have a Netlabels collection in archive.org and facilitate Netlabels to have hosting here. So these became the two main hosting sites for Netlabels at the time that facilitated all the boom of Netlabels that happened. Scene.org, popularized by the creator of 5 Musicians, and archive.org's Netlabels channel, which was popularized by the creator of Mono 211. So these two labels, or their creators actually, were fundamental, instrumental in assisting the boom of things, because the main problem that we had with Netlabel releases around this time, 2001, 2002, 2003, was the hosting. The hosting was still expensive. You have to pay for a website, and if sometimes they only restricted you to certain megabytes, so you had to find some other way to have your files hosted. And then if you became popular, you would generate a lot of traffic, and some hosts would charge you for the extra bandwidth that you would take. So it was very important to find locations where to put your files up. And there were a lot of FTPs, but they were temporary or not that big in size or not very open to free for download stuff. So scene.org and archive.org became one of the main repositories. And other websites started showing up. There was Sonic Squirrel, there was Dogmazik, Gemendo came into the scene, which also facilitated a lot. Bandcamp also came into the scene, which a lot of people migrated to. SoundCloud before that as well. But before then, in 2001, 2002, there were no such sites. There was mp3.com, which restricted you to a very low number of files. And that was pretty much it. You had to go to SoulSeek if you wanted to share your music. And I shared a lot of stuff on SoulSeek, net audio releases on SoulSeek, as I chatted with other people who were just there for pirated music. we were trying to promote Netlabel music there as well. Moving on to other labels that were influential, Kahvi was one of the mostly highly renowned labels that was founded also around this time. I'm going to play a release or a track by Alpha Conspiracy in particular, which I have the download for here somewhere, if I can find it. Number 53. Shit, where is it? Okay, I have it here. I have to download it. I don't have it yet because I played the MP3 before. Okay, it's right here. I can play it now. Okay, here we go. So Alpha Conspiracy is also known as Necros, Andrew Sega. Alpha Conspiracy was his new project name. And he became very famous as a music producer and audio producer for games and other stuff. a very well produced track, as you see, for 2001. So it's really good, and you can see here that's his Cypher sampler, and the release only had 4 of the track releases. Andrew Seg ended up releasing a full album, also called Cypher, which had the full 11 tracks, and released at his own label, Diffusion Records, and Analog Ether. I'm not sure what Analog Ether is. But yeah, what I wanted to talk about is that a lot of artists had some affinity with the music label scene and the net audio scene, but they also had a commercial side to their tracks. So they try to mobilize to commercialize their work in some way to, you know, have the track available free for download if you want to listen, but offer a way, if you're a fan, if you like what you hear, have a way to give back to the musician and get the full release or a high quality version of the release or something like that. Unfortunately, it created a lot of well, not a lot, but some misunderstanding that some musicians and some listeners would see net labels as not being real labels. And we suffered a lot with that on Enough Records, and we made some retorques, some heavy retorques on that as well. We can get into that later. But if you see like a notice here, for commercial release, if the artist gets signed to a real record label, he or she must make sure to have like a valid effort to create a new or remixed version. Like, don't ask the label to delete it from the catalog. And unfortunately, a lot of net labels succumb to that. They release an artist that just wants to be recognized, then it starts getting recognized. A random label wants to pick up the release, and instead of them doing a new release for this label, they want to pretend that their past didn't exist and remove the release from the net label. And that's a big insult for all the work that the net label did for them, in my humble opinion. To this day, I'm still, it's one of the biggest things that really disappoints me in mankind. It's when an artist comes and asks me to remove a release from Enough Records because, you know, they're just not proud of it anymore. Net labels are real labels. Once it's out, it's out. You can't undo the past. And a lot of labels just, you know, brushed away the past. I'm not saying that this is what happened with this artist in particular, with Kahvi. I don't know the history between Alpha Conspiracy and Kahvi. I'm just saying that it happens with a lot of other artists. And sometimes labels themselves. I give you the example of Tokyo Dawn Records. This is one of the first releases of Tokyo Dawn Records when they rebooted their catalog in 2002. They rebooted the catalog from zero, and they hid away all the previous releases that they had done under the music group thing. You can still find them at Tokyo Dawn, download archives on scene.org. But there are a lot of releases before Tokyo Dawn Records. It's here under old. Before they rebooted their catalog, they had 180 tracks released that just suddenly from one year to the next were just like, oh no, we're a new label, we're starting fresh, we're going to focus on commercial releases, and we're going to have just 1 or 2 stuff free for download like they had their main compilation, which is very high quality, and I can sort of understand why they rebooted. Let's play the track, Prymer and Blaktroniks with Pimp Knowledgy. I kind of understand why they wanted to reboot and relaunch the label. They wanted to keep the name, keep the roster of artists, but give it a more professional look, distancing themselves from the net label scene. But at the same time, it's a bit of a disrespect for the net label scene. Or at least that's what I felt at the time. Anyway, let's listen to the track.
Connected to satellites, overseers, and internet hustlers who dominate digital networks for web warlords or people pushers, advertisers, etc. I shall expose you bastards of organized mind control. You can't hypnotize me with your magic and sorcery or DVDs and digital TVs. My brain is on lockdown. It's in defense mode. It's locked with a code from forgotten souls who once lived in a divided kingdom full of trifling towers. I hear spiritual voices from past and present. Frequencies and vibrations from people and places. They say we must focus on the future, recognize the new century, and be aware of the eye in the sky. And most truths are old lies, Pimpnology like no other. So fuck you, big brother, cause little man has a slingshot with a Pentium chip in the handle grip, just waiting for someone to slip from behind the gates of Pimpnology. Free your mind, and intelligence will follow the paper trail like a hungry puppy, searching for crumbs. So go ahead, make my day. Log on, load up, sign in, connect to more bullshit for info seekers and computer tweakers trapped by the web, providing a currency flow to feed the few technology kingpins. See, all I see is whores with software and credit cards. Pimping is easy. Ask any consumer junkie strung out on media gumbo or .com fondue. As dinner is served by global communications via satellites directly to cell phones, versatellas, billboards, automobiles, etc. Close encounters of the worst kind, written space in everyone's mind, reality controlled, bought and sold to the highest bidder for worldwide peer pressure. Now your level of success is measured by the amount of devices, aka electronic vices, that's carried on the hip or inside the coat pocket. Symbols, logos, and call letters, etc. Multi-level pimping. Read between the lines of this babble from Babylonia, the epic center for bullshit and jealousy, mind games and double standards. Hollywood is not respecting me or my peer group, the fearless few who speak to the clueless collective. How shall we save a whole today, tomorrow, yesterday? Mass hallucination. Time is an endless loop, powered by an unstable history. Pimpnology.
Okay, so very well produced, very good track, and this was like a compilation album that they put out, and it was very well produced. Like they actually had a physical album. They gave out a lot of copies. I think I had one at some point, not sure. I remember trying to get one at Evoke, but I was too full with stuff and I couldn't take back, or they only had one copy, something like that. And then I was mad and I thought someone had stolen my copy. I remember some shit like that at some Evoke back then. Anyways, I met them. They're great people. They just wanted to go commercial, and they were successful in their endeavor. If you check their music catalog, they had a lot of new releases, and you can buy the digital release, and they have specific kind of sound, you know, it's a jazzy hip-hop kind of vibe to it. They also do audio plugins. You might have used some of them. I know I have. I use Nova for some mastering stuff. And, you know, they kept aligned on their vision, and they went forward, and they moved on from being a music group, releasing tracked music formats, to becoming, you know, a more reliable record label with a commercial endeavor behind it, not just being free for download, but having a commercial backing behind it. And it got a lot of shit from some of more traditional net labels that were focused under the specific free for download, and this is what is revolutionizing music, you know. Net label scene is killing the music industry, and it's a good thing. And other people were trying to, you know, find the middle ground between how can we still help, how can we still put out free music, but at the same time help commercialize stuff. And I think that's an important part of the net label scene that maybe got a bit lost throughout the years. And nowadays with Bandcamp, it's so much easier. Now it became the standard. Netlabel set the standard for the music industry. Nowadays, you put your stuff up on Bandcamp and you have to have a free preview. Unless you're a big artist, people won't buy the stuff before they listen. And back then, in the early 2000s, this was not how the music industry operated. Back then, they were suing Napster for having previews of their music. There was no music streaming There was no music streaming services whatsoever available. One of the first systems that showed up for buying music was Bleep, which was a Warp Records, wasn't even part of a bigger label system. It took many years for the music industry to catch up and go, and their way in was through Apple Store and iTunes and now Spotify. But the indies still strive a lot through Bandcamp, and Bandcamp's model is very aligned with what the original Netlabel model was, which was having things free for download, and if you want to pay something to support the artist, you can do that. Jamendo was also a big input in terms of promoting Creative Commons, but I think now the standard is Bandcamp. Anyways, moving on, I wanted to play a few more tracks from some of my favorite homies, some more experimental stuff. Entity was a label that was out on I think 2003, around then. And they had this Icelandic artist called Elín, and she had some very good tracks. Listening to track 2, Undercurrents. Yeah, so Elín from Entity ended up, after listening to this EP, ended up inviting Elín to participate on the dark ambient compilation that I was putting up at the time. So Entity was like a sister label to us. They were friends of ours. I participated on a few of their compilations. You can see my name right here on their first release, 5e Phalanx. They released some stuff with Enough Records. We released some stuff with them. And they had this very specific niche of sound, cinematic, dark ambient with some electronic vibes. Sometimes it got really aggressive, but mostly was around being cinematically dark. So very nice sounds, very cool stuff. They're my homies, so I wanted to plug them on this video. There's another release from me here. This one's pretty good. The one collaboration with M of the Conv net label, which was also was a Spanish net label focused on experimental music concrete, and they had a very good catalog. Never managed to convince him to release something from me because my stuff was too digital, and he always wanted like more organic stuff. And then they stopped being open to demos, and then that was a lost opportunity. But I love their catalog. Is it still online? That's a good question. Conv music label, probably not. Maybe without the V. Yeah, you can see it on Discogs, but is it on archive.org? Hope it is. Yes, it is. Okay. A lot of very good releases on this label as well, especially if you like experimental sort of sounds, electroacoustic. They have very good releases. And I was really exploring those kind of genres back then. Anyways, that was my plug to Entity. Another label that I wanted to plug was the Mimi Records. They also had this very good drone. Mimi Records focuses on doing music for both from both Portugal and Japan. They're Portuguese, but they have a fetish for Japan, so the label only puts out music from Portugal or Japanese artists. And this is from a Japanese artist, and they had very good drones, which I will play because I can. The whole release is very ambient, fulfilling, enveloping. Drone music is a bit you need to have your timing to get into it, so it's not very good for showcasing, especially in the mix. But I wanted to plug Me Records, and this is my favorite release from their entire catalog, so I highly recommend you to listen to this, especially if you like drone music or if you're curious into it. Go check out this release in particular, Yumi no Drone. It's really, really good. Really relaxing sort of music. Other people that I wanted to plug is the Kosmoplovci / floatingjoint. They released a lot of good music throughout the years. I think they renamed floatingjoint to studiosound at some point. But they have a lot of experimental music and a lot of what they call hardcore ambient, which is very aggressive sort of ambient music and oppressive sort of music. This release in particular, Koi Triplex, they had Koi Triplex issue number 1, which was an actual CD, which you could get a copy of, and I do have a copy of that. And then they released Koi Triplex 2, which was free for download as well. And I want to play a track from this. Multiplex features a lot of ambient tracks, more like aggressive, lost in space sort of ambient. It's just one example. They have different kind of stuff, and I collaborated in a few releases of the demo scene with them, either doing music for them or doing some code for some of their music, and it was a really great experience. And I really suggest you listen to the whole process, because again, drone music and ambient music is not very good for showcasing. You really need to let it play for a long period of time in the background. Let's move on to something else that I also wanted to show, which for me is one of the best releases that I found from the Netlabel scene. It's Access to Arasaka, Metax, this track in particular, White Walls. All of these tracks, Access to Arasaka is a very specific genre of music. It's like glitch music, but ambient cinematic and in a post-dubstep sort of way, and post clicks and cuts. So it's very specifically futuristic, feels a bit cyberpunk, like you're lost in the mainframe and you're feeling the emotions of the mainframe riveting. And the whole album has those kind of glitchy sounds, but very well produced. And then the climax of the album is this track where they finally have vocals. And it's extremely emotional, and the glitches and the clicks, they all work so well. For me, it's a total masterpiece. love this track. Love this track so much. So sad and emotional, but I love it. I love it. Access to Arasaka ended up getting signed to Tympanic, which is a rather famous IDM / industrial sort of label from the United States, I believe. And released a few albums there. And then nowadays Access to Arasaka has this Bandcamp, but he still releases music there. But this White Walls was really good, and his releases through Illphabetik. It's one of those releases that I wish I had managed to release just as a label owner and as an artist, because this track is so well produced. I still try to replicate some of this because I do like making glitch sort of sounds, ambience, what's it called? It's not patterns, it's like I try to make those kind of sounds and try to put vocals in it and having it the level of emotion matching the electronic glitches with the vocal emotion is really hard to match and not have it like screw up on the equalization. So it's really well mastered, very well produced, and I totally love it. It's really, really good. Anyways, one final track before we head out from this long video. The Industrialism, The Great Bridge, released at Sirona Records. It's another of those releases that I wish I had released at my label. Sirona Records put out a massive amount of releases, like a track a day at some point in time. This was completely lost in the middle of their catalog. I only managed to find it because the Industrialism was a moniker for the project of this person, Cesar Alexandre, which unfortunately already passed away, and he released some stuff through Enough Records. And he was promoting this because I was following him on Facebook. This is an amazing track. It uses sample stuff from one of my favorite video games, which is Shadow of the Colossus, and it's really good. It's cinematic, uses the opera cinematic feeling of the original game, but at the same time has this immense drill and bass breakcore middle in it, which it's reminiscing of Venetian Snares, which is one of my favorite artists. And well, I hope you enjoy, and I hope the drill and bass section is the first track. I think it is, but let's see. The opera sounds are really low, could really use some mastering. Totally epic. Love that one. Love it so much. Wish so much this had been released at Enough Records. But it's a really great track. And really making good use of the original cinematic sounds from Shadow of the Colossus. They're mixed together in a very different way to create this crescendo, because I don't remember that cinematic sort of classical arrangement throughout Shadow of the Colossus. It's not like a simple sample. It sampled different parts and then mixed them into that sound. At least that's what I feel like. Haven't double checked. The cat wants to say hello, and I want to say goodbye. This is the last track that I had to play for you. Hope you enjoyed this video / mixtape of the origins of the Netlabel scene, of the music tracker group scene, and all the different stuff. There's still a lot of Netlabels active. You can see a list of them at netlabelguide.com. What is the future of Netlabels? I'm not sure. It kind of has diminished its role with all the resources that now they exist for indie artists. It has become a bit of you don't really need to have a Netlabel. You can just be an artist and put your stuff up on Bandcamp and deal with all the marketing stuff yourself directly. I think one of the biggest selling points for Netlabels when they were booming was that you had curation seal of approval from the label. And you could also use it, or a lot of labels use it, to have a specific seal of also the genre and niche of music that you are putting out. And that's one of the main driving forces. And they were kind of mimicking what vinyl labels sort of did for a very long time. And with Bandcamp nowadays, it's very easy for any artist to just put their music out like that, and they don't really see the appeal of Netlabels anymore. I think Netlabel music has been dwindling in popularity for a few years now, in favor of these more indie ways of just, putting stuff up on commercial labels for digital distribution, streaming services, putting it up on YouTube, putting it up on Spotify, putting it up on Bandcamp mostly. I think Bandcamp has been one of the biggest platforms nowadays, and it allows for both models and all the hybrid models you can think of. So for an indie artist, for an indie label, that's perfect. You don't need to put the music free for download. You can put it for, name your price or pay $1, but listen on stream how many times you want to make sure you know what you're getting. So yeah, but still a lot of good things being put out on different Netlabels. Enough Records is still active. Feel free to follow us at enoughrecords.cn.org. We have a lot of great music out, and also recently released and to be released. I'm going to show you our website real quick before we head out, or my cat stops bothering me. So yeah, still a lot of stuff coming out, and we have a synthwave compilation which is also coming out, which is probably already out by the time you watch this video, which was a lot of work to put together, and I hope you enjoy. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye. Take care. Enjoy the Netlabel day, and check out the other good Netlabel releases that have been out on July 14th, 2022. Bye bye everyone. Take care.